Welcome to a unique storytelling experience that I've prepared especially for you. Today, we will dive deep into a dark psychological crime story, a tale that will challenge your understanding of human nature and the fragile boundary between light and darkness. Before we begin, if you enjoy gripping stories, chilling mysteries, and complex characters, make sure you've subscribed to the channel and turned on notifications. Your support is the greatest motivation for me to continue creating more compelling content. The story you're about to hear is based on truth, not in a literal sense, but as a metaphor for the hidden fears within us all. It is the story of a killer who unleashed a wave of shocking crimes, transforming a peaceful community into a spiral of panic and despair. This is not just a criminal case. It is a profound look into the human soul when confronted with unthinkable brutality. Join me as we uncover this haunting three-chapter tale. The small town of Havenwood, nestled deep within the verdant embrace of upstate New York, had always prided itself on its quiet charm and unwavering sense of community. Its streets, lined with ancient oak trees and quaint Victorian homes, whispered tales of generations past, of simple lives lived and cherished. Children rode bicycles with carefree abandon, their laughter echoing through the crisp autumn air. Neighbors knew each other by name, by habit, by the rhythm of their daily lives. It was, in every sense of the word, a haven, until it wasn't. The first hint of the darkness that would soon engulf Havenwood arrived not with a bang, but with a chilling, almost imperceptible tremor, like the first crack in a perfectly still pond. It began with the disappearance of Sarah Miller, a 27-year-old librarian known for her quiet demeanor and her uncanny ability to recommend precisely the right book. Sarah wasn't one to simply vanish. She had a routine, a predictable orbit that rarely deviated. Her absence, initially dismissed as a spontaneous trip or a brief, unannounced visit to family, soon morphed into a gnawing concern when her car remained in her driveway and her beloved cat, Mittens, began to wail incessantly at her untouched food bowl. Detective Elias Thorne, a man whose face bore the indelible marks of 20 years on the force, a constellation of crow's feet around his weary eyes, a permanent furrow between his brows, was the first to take Sarah's disappearance seriously. He had a sixth sense for things being wrong, a gut feeling honed by countless cases that had started with a shrug and ended in tragedy. His initial inquiries yielded nothing but bewildered shrugs and genuine sadness. Sarah was liked by everyone. She had no enemies, no secret life, no reason to flee. 2 weeks later, the stillness was irrevocably shattered. Sarah Miller's body was discovered in a secluded patch of woods just outside the town limits, partially obscured by a thicket of weeping willows. The scene was meticulously arranged, almost ritualistic. Her hands were clasped over her chest, a single, perfectly white gardenia resting between them. There were no obvious signs of struggle, no defensive wounds. The cause of death, later determined by the medical examiner, was a single, precise stab wound to the heart, so clean, so deliberate, it spoke of an almost surgical precision. The news ripped through Havenwood like a wildfire, consuming the tranquility it had long enjoyed. The initial shock quickly gave way to a collective shiver of fear. This wasn't some random act of violence, a robbery gone wrong. This was calculated. This was personal, or at least it felt that way. The gardenia, a symbol of purity and grace, felt like a cruel irony, a taunt. Elias Thorne found himself staring at the sterile photographs of the crime scene, a knot tightening in his stomach. He'd seen plenty of death, but this felt different. The killer hadn't just taken a life. They had made a statement. The lack of struggle baffled him. Had Sarah known her attacker? Had she been taken by surprise, rendered helpless before she could react? The Me reported traces of a powerful sedative in her system, answering at least one question and raising a dozen more. This was not a crime of passion. It was a crime of cold, premeditated intent. The local police department, small and accustomed to petty theft and domestic disputes, was overwhelmed. The media, scenting blood in the water, descended upon Havenwood, their satellite trucks and bright lights a garish contrast to the town's muted hues. Havenwood, once a forgotten gem, was now the epicenter of a chilling national story. Then came the second victim. Mark Jensen, a jovial high school history teacher and beloved baseball coach, was found a month after Sarah's discovery, in an abandoned barn on the outskirts of town. His body, too, was meticulously arranged, a single crimson rose placed upon his chest. The cause of death was identical. A precise stab wound to the heart, no signs of struggle, the telltale sedative in his system. Mark, like Sarah, had been a pillar of the community, universally liked, without a hint of scandal or animosity. He was found just 3 days after his disappearance, shortening the window of dread for his family but intensifying the terror for the town. 2 victims. 2 respected members of the community. 2 different flowers but the same chilling signature. The fear in Havenwood mutated from a shiver to a full-blown panic. A serial killer. The words, whispered at first, soon became a shouted reality. Children were no longer allowed to play outside unsupervised. Doors that had always remained unlocked were now double-bolted. The friendly waves between neighbors became cautious nods, their eyes scanning the shadows. Suspicion, a venomous intruder, began to seep into the community's once impenetrable fabric. Detective Thorne, now leading a hastily assembled task force that included a bewildered FBI agent from the regional office, Agent Clara Vance, felt the immense weight of the town's fear pressing down on him. Clara was sharp, methodical, fresh out of Quantico with a psychology degree and an almost unnerving calm. She brought with her the sophisticated profiling techniques that Thorne, a seasoned street cop, only dimly understood. The signature is key, Detective, Vance explained, her voice low and precise, as they pored over crime scene photos in their makeshift headquarters in the town hall basement. The flowers, the precise wound, the lack of struggle. This killer is highly organized, careful, and almost certainly enjoys the control they exert. But why these 2? Thorne gestured to the photos. Sarah, a librarian. Mark, a teacher. No connection. No shared social circle. No obvious motive. No pattern in their lives that we can discern. Vance tapped a pen thoughtfully against her notepad. That's what makes it so terrifying. It's arbitrary. Or it appears arbitrary. The lack of a clear connection forces everyone in Havenwood to feel vulnerable. If these 2 seemingly random, upstanding citizens can be taken, then anyone can. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit in Quantico had been briefed, and a preliminary profile was beginning to take shape. A white male, likely in his late 20s to early 40s, intelligent, meticulous, and suffering from a severe narcissistic personality disorder, coupled with some form of paraphilia centered around control and ritual. He was likely charming, able to blend seamlessly into the community, perhaps someone no one would ever suspect. The profile offered little comfort. It described half the male population of Havenwood. As the days turned into weeks, the investigation became a grueling, thankless slog. Every lead seemed to unravel into a dead end. Every potential witness had nothing substantial to offer. The town, once so open, had become a fortress of suspicion. Thorne saw it in the eyes of the townsfolk, a mixture of fear and growing resentment. Resentment towards the police for not catching the killer, towards the media for sensationalizing their tragedy, and even towards each other, as the quiet whispers of "who could it be?" began to fester. The local newspaper, the Havenwood Herald, once filled with benign announcements of bake sales and high school football scores, now ran daily updates on the Havenwood horror, fueling the public's anxiety. Editorials called for swift justice, for answers, for an end to the nightmare. One chilly evening, as a thick fog rolled in from the nearby lake, obscuring the familiar landmarks of Havenwood, Detective Thorne sat alone in his office. He was studying a map of the town, meticulously marking the locations where Sarah and Mark had been found. 2 distinct spots, roughly equidistant from the town center, but in opposite directions. He then marked their homes. Again, no clear geographical pattern. It was as if the killer was deliberately avoiding any discernible geometric relationship. His phone buzzed. It was Agent Vance. Her voice was taut, stripped of its usual calm professionalism. "Detective, another one. Just came in. Patricia Davies." She was a volunteer at the Historical Society. Thorne felt a cold dread seep into his bones. Patricia Davies, a spry 70-year-old, known for her encyclopedic knowledge of Havenwood's past and her vibrant, purple-dyed hair. A completely different demographic, a different life, yet another respected, harmless member of the community. Location? Thorne asked, his voice strained. The old mill on the west side of town, Vance replied. They found her in the main grinding room. And detective, the signature is there. Same wound, same sedative. And a flower. This time, it's a deep blue iris. 3 victims. 3 distinct flowers. A white gardenia, a red rose, a blue iris. The colors of the American flag. The thought sent a shiver down Thorne's spine, far colder than the autumn air. Was this a message? A sick, twisted display of patriotism? Or something far more sinister? The Havenwood horror now had a name whispered in terrified tones across the nation. The gardener, the serial killer who meticulously cultivated death, leaving behind a macabre floral signature. The town of Havenwood, once a symbol of peace, had become a garden of fear, waiting for the next bloom of terror. Elias Thorne knew, with a certainty that chilled him to his core, that this was just the beginning. The stillness had been shattered, and now the storm was truly upon them. The revelation of the 3rd victim, Patricia Davies, transformed Havenwood's fear into a palpable, suffocating blanket of dread. The whisper of the gardener no longer felt like a sensationalized media moniker. It was a terrifying reality that stalked their quiet streets. The sequence of flowers white, red, blue intensified the chilling speculation. Was it a patriotic mockery? A perverse artistic statement? Or did the colors and species hold a deeper, more personal meaning for the killer? A code the investigators were yet to decipher. Detective Elias Thorne, now working almost exclusively with Agent Clara Vance, felt the pressure mount with an unbearable intensity. The FBI had deployed additional resources, including a renowned forensic botanist, Dr. Eris Thorne, no relation, hoping to glean some insight from the specific flora left at each scene. The town hall basement, once an echoing space, now buzzed with the constant murmur of conversations, the clatter of keyboards, and the low hum of stressed-out individuals. Vance, ever the stoic professional, found herself battling a subtle but growing frustration. Each victim was meticulously researched, their lives dissected down to the smallest detail. Yet no common thread emerged. Sarah Miller, the quiet librarian, 27. Mark Jensen, the jovial history teacher, 42. Patricia Davies, the vibrant historical society volunteer, 70. Different ages, different backgrounds, different social circles, different parts of town. They were, on the surface, entirely disconnected. "We're missing something fundamental," Vance declared one bleary-eyed morning, gesturing at the sprawling corkboard covered in victim photos, maps, and timelines. "The motive isn't apparent. The victimology is too broad. This isn't a killer targeting a specific type of person for sexual gratification, revenge, or financial gain. This feels symbolic." Elias Thorne, nursing a lukewarm coffee, grunted. "Symbolic or not, 3 people are dead, and everyone here thinks they're next." He knew the sentiment well. His own wife, Martha, had started barricading their doors at night, and their 2 teenage children were confined to the house after school. The town's once vibrant Main Street was now a ghost town after dark. Businesses were suffering. People were leaving. Havenwood was dying, slowly but surely, under the shadow of the gardener. Dr. Thorne, the botanist, had offered some intriguing but ultimately unhelpful insights. The white gardenia signified purity, grace. The red rose, love, passion, sometimes sorrow. The blue iris, hope, faith, valor. "They are all flowers with significant cultural symbolism," he explained, his voice dry and academic. "They speak to human emotion, to life's grand narratives. The killer is making a statement, clearly. But what statement, exactly?" The police had released a composite sketch based on a fleeting glimpse a jogger claimed to have had near Mark Jensen's barn. A tall, slender figure, wearing a wide-brimmed hat, face obscured. It was vague, generic, and had yielded no credible leads, only a deluge of mistaken identities and frantic calls from paranoid citizens. One evening, a glimmer of a breakthrough, or what felt like one, emerged. A diligent junior officer, sifting through hundreds of hours of surveillance footage from local businesses, found a fleeting clip. From a convenience store camera, roughly 5 blocks from Patricia Davies' home, taken the night she disappeared. A man, tall and slender, matching the general description, wearing a dark trench coat and a wide-brimmed hat, was seen walking down the street. His face was still obscured by the hat's shadow, but he was carrying something, a small, dark satchel. And for a split second, as he passed under a street lamp, a flash of red light glinted from his lapel. "Enhance that," Thorne ordered, leaning closer to the screen. "Zoom in on the lapel." "What is that?" After several agonizing minutes of digital enhancement, the faint image resolved into a small, almost imperceptible pin. It was a stylized raven, its eyes glowing with a faint red light. Vance's eyes widened. A raven. Ravens are often associated with mystery, prophecy, even death. And that red glow. It's unusual. The raven pin became their new obsession. They scoured online forums, local artisan shops, anything that could link them to such a specific, unique item. It was a long shot, but it was something. As the investigation continued to crawl, the killer struck again, just as the town was beginning to cautiously breathe, 3 weeks after Patricia Davies. This time, the victim was Tommy O'Connell, a beloved local baker, whose warm bread and kind smile had been a fixture in Havenwood for 40 years. Tommy was found in his own bakery, sprawled on the floor amidst spilled flour and overturned proofing baskets. A vibrant yellow sunflower rested on his chest. The sunflower. Hope, happiness, adoration. The fourth flower, the fourth victim. The pattern was becoming agonizingly clear. Not just the ritual, but the timing. Roughly a month between each murder, give or take a few days. The victims were becoming more integrated into the heart of the community: a librarian, a teacher, a historical volunteer, a baker. People who knit the social fabric of Havenwood together. The red, white, and blue flowers had initially pointed to a patriotic theme, but the yellow sunflower disrupted that, unless it was a secondary, more personal set of symbols. Dr. Thorne, the botanist, offered a new theory. The killer might be using florography, the language of flowers. Each flower could be conveying a specific message to the public, or perhaps to the victims themselves, or even to the killer's own warped sense of justice. Vance considered this. So Sarah, purity; Mark, love; Patricia, hope; and Tommy, adoration. What could those attributes mean to our killer, and why would he punish people who embody them? Elias Thorne felt a sickening realization begin to form in his mind. What if he's not punishing them? What if he's collecting them? Or rather, collecting the essence they represent to him. The idea was disturbing. A killer who was not driven by anger or lust, but by a twisted sense of aesthetic or emotional acquisition. It painted a picture of someone profoundly disturbed, perhaps even delusional. The task force redoubled its efforts to trace the raven pin. They finally got a hit from an obscure online artisan marketplace. The pins were custom-made by a reclusive artist who lived in a cabin in the remote Adirondack Mountains, nearly 100 miles north of Havenwood. The artist, known only by his online handle Nighthawk, specialized in gothic and nature-inspired jewelry, often incorporating LED lights. A small team, including Thorne and Vance, immediately set out for the cabin. The journey was long and arduous, through winding, unpaved roads and dense forest. When they finally reached the remote clearing, they found a rustic but well-maintained cabin, surrounded by a meticulously kept garden, even in the autumn chill. The artist, a gaunt, intensely private man named Silas Croft, met them at the door, his eyes sharp and wary. He readily admitted to making the raven pins, selling them online and at various artisan fairs. He had sold perhaps 24 of them over the past year. He kept meticulous records, not of buyers' names. Many used pseudonyms, but of shipping addresses. Among the addresses, one stood out like a beacon. A P.O. box in a small town just 20 miles from Havenwood. The name associated with it was Arthur Finch. Arthur Finch? Thorne repeated the name, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. Didn't we get a tip about a groundskeeper early on? Someone who worked at the old botanical gardens on the edge of town, before they closed down a few years ago. Vance immediately pulled up their database. Yes, Arthur Finch. He was interviewed briefly after Sarah Miller's disappearance. He had an alibi, though claimed he was out of town visiting an ailing relative. We cleared him. Alibis can be faked, Thorne muttered, a new sense of urgency thrumming through him. And a groundskeeper, a botanist by trade, working with flowers. It's too perfect. The botanical gardens. Now defunct, overgrown. A skeletal remnant of its former beauty. A place where Arthur Finch would have known every hidden path, every secluded corner. A place he would have loved, perhaps even grieved for, after its closure. They descended upon the abandoned botanical gardens, a vast, desolate expanse of crumbling greenhouses and wild, untamed shrubbery. The air was thick with the scent of decay and damp earth. It was a place where beauty had once flourished, now consumed by shadow. Inside what was once the main conservatory, a vast glass structure now choked with dead vines and shattered panes, they found it. Not a body but a shrine. A macabre display of pressed flowers, carefully mounted on dark velvet, beneath glass. There were dried gardenias, roses, irises, and sunflowers arranged in a perfect square. And at the center, a small, hand-carved wooden raven, its eyes inlaid with tiny red stones that seemed to glow in the dim light. Beneath the display, a small, leather-bound journal lay open. Elias Thorne picked it up, his hands trembling slightly. The handwriting was neat, elegant, yet deeply unsettling. It spoke of a profound disillusionment with humanity, with the ugliness that had taken over Havenwood. It detailed how the beauty and purity of the natural world, represented by flowers, were being suffocated by human greed and neglect. The closure of the botanical gardens had been the final straw. The entries described the victims not as people, but as symbols. Sarah Miller, the purity of knowledge, who had been corrupted by sensationalized media. Mark Jensen, the love for youth, who had failed to inspire true appreciation for beauty. Patricia Davies, the hope of history, who had seen the past forgotten. And Tommy O'Connell, the adoration of simple pleasures, whose craft was being replaced by commercialism. The killer, Arthur Finch, saw himself not as a murderer, but as a gardener of souls, pruning away the imperfections, preserving the essence of what he believed Havenwood had lost, transforming them into a permanent floral display of his twisted ideals. He was cleansing the town one beautiful, symbolic life at a time. As Thorne finished reading the chilling passages, a sudden, sharp crack echoed from deeper within the conservatory. It sounded like a twig snapping, but the hair on the back of his neck stood on end. "He's here," Vance whispered, drawing her weapon. He knew we'd eventually come here. The hunt was no longer for a ghost. It was for a man, a deranged artist of death, lurking in the shadows of his desolate garden, ready to add another bloom to his collection. The air grew heavy, pregnant with the terrifying knowledge that their presence had now become part of his macabre tapestry. The next chapter, they knew, would be their reckoning. The silence that followed the snap was thicker than the dust motes dancing in the shafts of weak sunlight filtering through the broken conservatory roof. Detective Thorne and Agent Vance, along with the two SWAT officers accompanying them, moved with deliberate, cautious steps, weapons raised. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth, decaying foliage, and something else, a faint, metallic tang that made Thorne's stomach clench. "Finch!" Vance's voice cut through the stillness, echoing off the high glass ceiling. "Arthur Finch, we know you're here. It's over." No response. Only the rustle of dry leaves underfoot and the occasional drip of water from a broken pane. The conservatory was a labyrinth of overgrown paths, derelict planting beds, and crumbling statuary, offering countless places to hide. It was Finch's domain, a place he knew intimately, where he had once nurtured life and now harvested death. Thorn spotted something amidst a tangle of dead rose bushes, a freshly dug patch of earth, meticulously tended, contrasting sharply with the general decay. Near it, a small, tarnished silver trowel lay on the ground. He knelt, examining the soil. It was soft, recently disturbed. He looked up, and his gaze landed on a small, hand-carved wooden bird, nestled almost perfectly within a knot of bare branches above the patch. It was a raven, identical to the pin found on Finch's alleged sketch, its eyes glowing faintly red. "He's watching us," Thorn murmured, pointing to the raven. "This is a setup. He wants us here." Just then, a faint, almost melodic humming drifted from a section of the conservatory dedicated to exotic plants, a place where tropical humidity still clung to the air, making it feel oppressive and claustrophobic. The humming was off-key, a disturbing lullaby. The team moved towards the sound, their boots crunching on gravel. As they approached the tropical dome, the humming grew clearer, revealing itself as an old folk song about a gardener tending his blooms. Inside, the air was thick with the earthy smell of peat and something cloyingly sweet, like jasmine. And there he was, Arthur Finch. He was a man of unassuming stature, thin and pale, with wispy gray hair and large, melancholic eyes that now held a disturbing gleam. He wore a simple gardener's smock, stained with soil, and in his gloved hands, he held a delicate pruning shears. He was tending to a lone, vibrant crimson lily, its petals unfurling in the humid air. Around him, on small pedestals, were more of his ghastly floral displays: the white gardenia, the red rose, the blue iris, the yellow sunflower, and now, a fifth empty pedestal waiting. "Arthur Finch," Vance commanded, her voice firm. "Put down the shears. You're under arrest for the murders of Sarah Miller, Mark Jensen, Patricia Davies, and Thomas O'Connell." Finch slowly turned, his expression serene, almost beatific. He didn't seem surprised or even particularly alarmed. "Arrest? My dear officers, I have merely been tending my garden." Havenwood had become so, overgrown, such rampant weeds, choking out the true beauty. His gaze swept over them, a look of profound pity in his eyes. "You don't understand. You see decay. I see potential. I see the seeds of a new beginning, purged of the superficial." He gestured to the lily. "This, you see, is for the mayor, Mayor Thompson. He allowed this beautiful place to wither. He allowed the weeds to grow. A beautiful crimson lily, for his vibrant, yet ultimately hollow, leadership." Thorn felt a jolt of ice water. The mayor. Finch wasn't stopping. He was escalating, moving up the chain, meticulously planning his next bloom. "You don't have to do this, Arthur," Thorn said, trying a different tack, his voice surprisingly gentle. "We can help you. You're clearly in pain." Finch laughed, a soft, dry sound that lacked any genuine mirth. "Pain? No, detective. I am liberated. I am a curator of true beauty. I found that true beauty, true essence, only manifests in purity, in sacrifice. Havenwood has forgotten what it means to be beautiful. It has forgotten its soul." Suddenly, with surprising speed for a man of his age, Finch lunged, not at them, but at the lily. He snipped the blossom cleanly from its stem. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he plunged the pruning shears into his own chest, precisely where the hearts of his victims had been. The ultimate act of his twisted ritual. The aftermath was a whirlwind of forensic teams, medical examiners, and investigators. Arthur Finch was dead, taking with him the full, unvarnished truth of his descent into madness. His journal, however, became the chilling testament to his psychological landscape. It detailed years of isolation, a growing obsession with the botanical gardens, and a profound sense of betrayal when the town allowed them to fall into disrepair. He saw the victims not as individuals, but as personifications of Havenwood's perceived moral decay, each flower a symbolic judgment or an attempt to preserve a dying virtue. The raven, he wrote, was his guide, his harbinger of truth, allowing him to see the hidden rot beneath the surface. In the weeks and months that followed, Havenwood slowly began the agonizing process of healing. The media circus eventually packed up, leaving behind a scarred but resilient community. Mayor Thompson, deeply shaken by Finch's plans, initiated a fund to restore the botanical gardens, renaming them the Havenwood Memorial Gardens, a place of beauty dedicated to the victims and a reminder of the darkness that had once threatened to consume them. Detective Elias Thorne, though deeply relieved that the terror was over, carried the indelible marks of the case. He had seen the absolute fragility of peace, the insidious creep of madness, and the capacity for evil to hide in plain sight. He and Agent Vance, who left Havenwood a few weeks after Finch's death, had formed a silent, unspoken bond through the shared trauma. They had stopped the gardener, but the experience had changed them forever. The flowers Arthur Finch had chosen, the white gardenia, the red rose, the blue iris, the yellow sunflower, and the crimson lily he had intended for the mayor, would forever be etched into the collective memory of Havenwood. They were no longer just symbols of beauty. They were monuments to a period of terror, a reminder that even in the most serene havens, the roots of evil could lie dormant, waiting for the precise moment to bloom. The whisper of ravens would always be a chilling reminder of the time when fear had taken root, and the once peaceful town learned that true beauty, like true evil, often comes in unexpected and terrifying forms.